I don't usually cry at films. I do feel either sad or depressed after watching certain films, but I have only ever cried at 6 in particular. They were Schindler's List from 1993, Brokeback Mountain from 2005, The Green Mile from 1999, Where the Crawdads Sing from 2022, Grave of the Fireflies from 1988, and David Lynch's The Elephant Man from 1980. Which is the film we're going to be looking at today. David Lynch had made his first feature film in 1977, Eraserhead. The film faced criticism on its release, but was much loved by midnight moviegoers. But to go from a disturbing and impenetrable existential horror film to a British Victorian costume drama could have seemed at the time to be a box office crisis for David Lynch. The Elephant Man made $26 million at the US box office, making back 5 times its original budget. In Victorian London, Dr. Frederick Treves wanders into a carnival hosting a freak show. After seeing many people who had abnormal designs, he stumbles across a so-called creature named the Elephant Man. Later, he finds the owner of the freak show and pays him for a private showing of the so-called Elephant Man. When he witnesses the man, he is mortified and devastated by what he is seeing. The man's real name is John Merrick, a man with a rare but seriously deforming illness. Tumours covering his body, his right arm is large and misshapen and his head enormously disfigured and perverted. Treves later presents Merrick in front of other medical practitioners at the London hospital to enhance his medical reputation and make aware of the specific illness Merrick has. Merrick is sent home but arrives late. Bites, his owner, beats him terribly as punishment. Bites then calls for Treves when Merrick is ill. Treves suspects that Bites has been horrifically mistreating the man and has been exploiting him for his own pleasure as well as others. Merrick is taken into hospital for treatment. A nurse is sent to give him his breakfast in the isolation ward and is immediately frightened by his appearance. Treves later learns that Merrick is highly intelligent and is a fast learner when he is presenting him to Mr. Cargom. One of the porters at the hospital finds Merrick and secretly exploits him to other members of society, including Bites, who wants, quote-unquote, his man returned. After the porter breaks into Merrick's room one night and parades him, Bite kidnaps him and takes him on tour with the freak show. During the tour, Merrick gets ill and Bite beats him for making a mockery in front of the audience after he collapses. The other performers have had enough and decide to escape, Merrick being amongst them. Merrick then goes on a long journey from mainland Europe to the UK, wearing a hood to cover his deformities. Whilst at the train station, a young boy decides to harass Merrick by pulling off his hood. Merrick tries to run away, but is cornered by members of the public and cannot escape. I am now going to talk about the real-life John Merrick, or Joseph Merrick, as that was his real name. I will try to keep this as brief as possible, as some of the things that Joseph Merrick went through was absolutely awful. His illness got progressively worse over time. He had chronic bronchitis and developing tumours all over his body. His right hand became bigger and increasingly immobile over time. While I do think the film is an amazing piece of art, it does take some creative liberties, specifically with the character of Bites. In the film he is shown as a tyrant and extremely abusive, whereas in real life he was anything but. He and Joseph were very good friends and business partners. Joseph was allowed to leave the hospital and tour with the freak show. I understand why David and the screenwriters took this creative liberty. It is so that the film represents the degrading side of what freak shows had. In the late 1800s, they were starting to be seen as taboo and in bad taste. It is assumable that owners of freak shows were extremely abusive and that it was depressingly common. The train station incident in the film is accurate but had to be toned down. I found this fact in the comment section of a YouTube video, so I don't know how accurate this fact is. In real life, the police had to guard Merrick as his deformities didn't just cause a scare, they caused total outrage and riot. Merrick was in total distress. He had no money as he had been robbed whilst in Europe, but had Frederick Treves' business card on his person. He showed it to the policeman and they escorted him to the London hospital. The film was based on the diaries and medical reports that Treves recorded on Merrick. There is no official reason that I can find why they changed his name from Joseph to John, but I can let that slide. In fact, I can see past a lot of the inaccuracies due to the efforts to detail the filmmakers put into the film's aesthetics, such as the set design and makeup for the Elephant Man. The makeup for Merrick was adapted from a replica of his body. His remains were kept in the London hospital but were sadly destroyed during the Blitz in the Second World War. The Elephant Man is one of the most emotional films I have ever seen. John Hurt gives an outstanding performance as John Merrick. You really feel for him as he struggles with his condition and being mistreated by his owner. You as the viewer want this man to just have a break and be accepted instead of being beaten and discriminated for his appearance. The film presents the ugliness in men and women in society. It's as if John is the only human in the film and everyone else is a freak of nature, but sadly he must wear a hood and cap to cover his face to stop people from looking at him in horror. Train station scene is extremely harrowing, especially when he shouts at everyone surrounding him. I am not an animal! It's so sad and depressing, yet so iconic. John Hurt sadly did not win his Oscar for Best Actor. That award went to Robert De Niro for Raging Bull. Sir Anthony Hopkins is great as always. Treves is the only hope Merrick has in society. The scene that always gets me emotionally is when he first sees Merrick and sheds a tear. He helps Merrick find his voice, which leads to John impressing Treves' arrogant superior, Mr. Cargon, with the Lord's Prayer, which is a magnificent scene and extremely powerful. Anthony and David Lynch never got on during the making of the film, which is a shame. The film would then launch Anthony Hopkins' career in the US and would lead him to great success as an actor. The supporting cast is very colourful but brilliant. Anne Bancroft is brilliant as always. She is the only American in the film, but her English accent is outstanding, which is very rare when Americans play British roles. She seems to be exploitative of John at first, but builds a connection with him and brings out his inner good. Bites, on the other hand, is completely heinous. He is a vile alcoholic, he beats his performers, especially John, as he gains the most attention of the freak show. He treats John like vermin. It's so disheartening to see this poor man be beaten and starved by a complete brute. His child assistant feels sorry for John. He hates seeing him be beaten for performing badly. He is played by a very young Dexter Fletcher, who went on to projects such as Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Band of Brothers. The makeup effects for the Elephant Man were outstanding. They are incredibly accurate to how he was in real life. The start of the film hides John until the scene with the nurse. You only get brief glimpses of him, which helps build up the tension until the shock horror of his reveal. A great method of storytelling, which has been repeated in films since. There are many visual metaphors in The Elephant Man, as well as David Lynch's other films. Specifically at the very start of the film, it shows a dreamlike sequence of assumably Merrick's mother being attacked by a group of elephants, hence why he thinks he is the way he is. At the very end, when Merrick dies in his sleep, the dream sequence shows his soul being accepted into heaven. Very symbolic, but very poignant and thought-provoking, especially with Adagio for strings. I had always heard of The Elephant Man as a kid, but I was told not to watch it since I could get very emotional and affected by certain films. I finally watched it during my first year of university and had no idea that the film was based on a true story. I have seen the film 3 times since, including viewing it at a screening in the Pictureville Cinema at the National Science and Media Museum. It's probably the first time I have cried in a packed cinema. The film is extremely powerful and brings out the ugliness in society. It's almost unwatchable. I would highly recommend this film if you are getting into David Lynch's body of work. I will warn you though, you will possibly cry.